I want you to watch for the bread to get golden. I want you to watch for the cheese to melt.
Think you know everything about cooking? Well, here are 15 things you're doing wrong in the kitchen. Using mediocre ingredients.
Salami, prosciutto, a lot of cheese.
We've all heard it said that good food starts with quality ingredients, and there's definitely a lot of truth to that. When you're cooking at home, it can be easy to choose ingredients based on convenience, but it's important to keep in mind that the freshest ingredients are always just going to taste the best. For instance, while buying bags of pre-shredded cheese may seem like less work than grating cheese by hand, pre-shredded cheddar is often made with cellulose, which keeps the cheese from becoming too moist in the bag. But it also keeps it from achieving the same sort of perfect gooey texture that you'd want from melting it down. Blocks of cheese are simply best, as well as seasonal produce bought at a farmer's market rather than a supermarket whenever possible. Fresh food is always going to be better than frozen, because when you're working with ingredients that already taste delicious on their own, that alone makes your work a whole lot easier. Forgetting mise en place.
Mise en who?
Forgetting to set up your mise en place is one of the most common mistakes that people make in the kitchen. And what does that mean? Well, quite simply, mise en place refers to the act of preparing your ingredients before you start cooking, including measuring out your portions and having everything set aside. This will allow you to take stock of what you have and make sure that you won't unexpectedly run out of ingredients partway through cooking. Setting up your mise en place beforehand will also come with the added benefit of having everything right there on hand as you work, which may not sound too necessary, but when you have everything cooking and timers are going off all at once, that simple convenience may mean the difference between a well-cooked meal or a burned mess. Not to mention, you won't have to keep returning to the fridge with messy hands while you're still in the thick of everything. Mise en place may be something that's easy to forget, but if you do, you'll only wind up regretting it eventually. Refrigerating unnecessarily.
This one. This one.
While it's definitely true that refrigeration can extend the lifespan of some foods, it's surprisingly common to assume this of things that, quite frankly, suffer when they're kept in the cold. Tomatoes, for instance, should always be stored at room temperature unless you like them bland and grainy. Cooling tomatoes breaks down their sugars, acids, and overall structural compounds in such a way that's sure to make for a disappointing dinner. But if you were to just keep your tomatoes on the counter, you'll wind up with a bright, juicy tomato precisely the way you want it. Potatoes, similarly, change at a structural level when they're kept in the refrigerator, converting their starches into sugars that then result in a changed taste and color. For the best quality potatoes, always make sure to store them in a cool, dark place. While keeping garlic in the fridge won't necessarily affect its taste, it will affect the taste of the food stored around it. And garlic doesn't actually need to be kept chilled anyway. Instead, you can leave your garlic in a cool, dry, dark place wrapped in a mesh bag for no longer than 3 to 5 months. How you're holding your knife.
That's a knife.
Do you practice proper knife handling techniques in the kitchen? Holding your knife right can mean the difference between enjoying a delicious meal with your friends and an unexpected trip to the emergency room. So it's definitely important to know what you're doing when you're handling any sharp objects. When it comes to a chef's knife, you'll want to make sure that you're holding the handle with your middle, ring, and pinky fingers. You'll want to set your index finger flat against the blade near its handle with a slight curl in the finger going back toward the handle. And then set your thumb on the opposite side of the blade so that it almost feels as though you're pinching it between your thumb and index finger. Holding your knife this way will grant you the ultimate amount of control over the blade, allowing you to make the cleanest, easiest cuts. How you're storing your herbs.
It's like an explosion of colorful flavors.
If you don't know how to take care of your herbs properly, within a matter of a few days, you'll already be left with a rotten, mushy mess. Some herbs are more durable than others, but if you know how to store them, it'll extend their shelf life by a surprising amount. First, when you bring your herbs home, remove them from any plastic bags before you trim the root ends. Place your herbs in a jar of water exactly as you would a bouquet of flowers. Now, this is the point where you're going to want to know precisely what herbs you're working working with. Hardier herbs, such as rosemary or mint, can be left out on the counter, making for some pretty aesthetic decorations as well as great-tasting food. For something a little more delicate, like cilantro or parsley, you'll want to put a plastic bag over the top of your herb bouquet before securing it with a rubber band, keeping them in the refrigerator. How you're storing your coffee beans.
7 grams of beans.
If you're keeping your coffee beans in either the fridge or freezer, then whether you know it or not, you're missing out on a lot of great flavor. Coffee beans stored in a chilled location will be affected by condensation, which will not only make them kind of soggy, it also weakens the coffee's taste. If you're looking to start your day with the best cup of coffee possible, make sure you keep your coffee beans stored in a completely airtight container, preferably made out of glass or ceramic, and then make sure to keep your coffee beans stored in a cool, dry spot like the kitchen cupboard. Not letting your food rest.
Let sit for 2 minutes down the hatch.
If you've ever rushed to eat your dinner only to find that it's been reduced to a soupy mess, seemingly for no reason, there's a very good possibility that you didn't let your food rest before serving. Food that's taken straight out of the oven needs time to sit before being disturbed. Otherwise, this can have a seriously negative effect on the overall consistency of your meal. When it comes to meats, allowing them time to sit will let them reabsorb a little bit of their own delicious juices, making for a more satisfying and flavorful portion overall, while also keeping your plate a little cleaner. Baked dishes such as lasagna need to be given time to rest too, again so that the liquids can be reabsorbed, but also to maintain the structural integrity of the dish. Using dull knives.
Cannot push a button if you disable his hand.
As intimidating as it might seem to work with the sharpest knife in the kitchen, believe it or not, that knife is actually going to be the safest one to use. When cooking with a dull knife, you're forced to apply more pressure than you would with a sharpened blade.
Ouch.
And this can cause the knife to slip and potentially cut fingers, even among the most attentive of cooks. If you want the safest kitchen experience, make sure to keep your knife sharpened to allow for quick, clean, easy slices. And make sure you don't forget to hold your knife properly. Ignoring acid.
And acid that really tenderizes the meat.
Have you mastered the 4 elements of the kitchen? According to award-winning chef Samin Nosrat, there are 4 elements that you need to master if you're hoping to be a master in the kitchen: salt, fat, acid, and heat. Most of us are familiar enough with the concept of salty, fatty, and spicy, but how many of us really consider the acidity of our meal when we're cooking? Doing so can be as simple as adding a splash of lemon to your fish or sprinkling a bit of vinegar over your vegetables. Foods that are high in acidity simply do a great job of bringing an extra zing to your meal. So if you're looking to bring a little something special to tonight's meal, make sure you aren't forgetting the acid. Overcrowding your pan.
Oh, Mama, I have got to get me one of these.
When you're cooking for the whole family, it can be especially tempting to overfill your pan in the hope of making a larger quantity of food in half of the time. But keep in mind that when you do that, it will cost you in the long run when it comes to taste. Whenever food cooks, it releases water, and water under heat will turn into steam. This steam needs room to escape from the pan, but it won't be able to if there's much food packed around it, resulting in a soggy meal that just won't have any of that nice brown color on the top. If you do need to cook more than your pan can fit, you're better off using 2 pans instead of overcrowding 1. Overcrowding your pasta.
The best spaghetti in a town.
Pasta seems simple to make, but it can be a tricky recipe. If you do it wrong, you'll wind up with a gluey, gummy lump. And this can often be the result of overcrowding. If you have a lot of pasta to cook, then always make sure that you're using a big pot, large enough to be filled with roughly 5 to 6 quarts of salted water. Bring your water to a rapid boil before adding your pasta, and then follow cooking instructions to come to the most delicious outcome. This will make sure that your pasta has enough room to cook without becoming all gummy and stuck together, only warm, carby goodness. Over-softening your butter.
You can never have too much butter.
We've all been there before. The recipe calls for the butter to be at room temperature, and you forgot to take it out of the fridge. So you think, no worries, I'll just throw it in the microwave to soften it, resulting in half-melted butter that completely changes the texture of your recipe. Properly softened butter will be nimble to the touch, but your fingers shouldn't be able to sink right through to the bottom. If it does, you've gone too far, and your cookies are probably going to taste like cardboard. As inconvenient as it may be to remember that you need to take your butter out of the fridge 45 minutes before it's needed, doing this is still one surefire way to make sure that your baking is always at its best. Placing hot food in the fridge.
The refrigerator was leaking.
When storing leftovers from a hot meal, it can be tempting to put your food in the fridge right away to make sure that it's kept safe. And even if you do consider the other items stored around your hot meal, you might just think that the fridge will chill it all down to generally the same temperature safely enough. But that may not be the case. Hot items stored in a refrigerator will always hold some potential for bringing the overall temperature up and introducing bacteria to the other items stored around it. If you're planning on keeping leftovers, it's always a better idea to let them rest and come to room temperature before storing them away in the fridge to protect the overall health and safety of your kitchen. Improperly boiling water. Do you know the difference between boiling water and bringing it to a simmer? It may seem like a silly question, but believe it or not, many people actually don't know how to properly boil water, and the difference between the two could have a massive impact on the outcome of your meal. You can identify a simmer when there are only a few bubbles bursting on the surface of the water every little while, and this is the preferred method of cooking for things like meat and fish. Boiling water, meanwhile, can be recognized the moment that the bubbles begin to burst wildly across the surface, and this is what you're going to want to see when adding in your pasta or vegetables. If you throw your food into the pot before it's managed to reach its full boil, then you simply aren't going to wind up with a properly cooked meal. Using the wrong measuring cups.
I think it's done, Daddy.
Yeah, are you sure?
Whether you mistakenly use a dry measuring cup for liquids or a liquid measuring cup for dry ingredients, getting the two mixed up can wind up being an unnecessary headache in the kitchen. But how can you tell the difference between the two? Well, simply enough, you can tell by looking at the top of the measuring cup. A measuring cup that's been made for dry ingredients won't have a spout. Instead, it should be completely leveled and lacking any headroom, making it fairly easy for you to scrape any excess off the top with a knife. Dry measuring cups are made to make the measuring of your dry ingredients, quite frankly, easier, whereas liquid measuring cups are made to make measuring liquids easier. These cups are made with a spout for easy pouring, as well as a little bit of headroom at the top to account for any spillage that may occur. While you can theoretically mix up the function of these two cups to some degree, it's a simple fact that identifying their proper functions and using them as they were intended will result in a much more accurate measurement. We're serving up more great videos. Just tap or click, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell to join our notification squad.